you. Good morning.
Good morning.
It is with great pleasure that we have with us today Aggie Hoffman. She is an outstanding attorney who has wide and diverse contributions to the people of Los Angeles. She is most well known for immigration law and her help with many people who are vulnerable, who live in our society free from fear. She's lectured on many important immigration topics. She was named Super Immigration Lawyer in Los Angeles Magazine for multiple years. She's fluent in Spanish and has knowledge of Hungarian, Russian, and Hebrew languages. She's a member of the Board of Directors of the British American Chambers of Commerce. She's been past president of the American Immigration Lawyer Association. We at the University of Southern California School of Social Work are very grateful that she's agreed to be our moderator for this esteemed panel. I give to you Senior Attorney Aggie Hoffman.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here today and to see so many people interested in issues that are of great importance to our society. And the number of you here is significant also because you are the future. We have, to help you along the road to the future, a very knowledgeable and accomplished panel who will help you focus on issues of interest to you, and as Chef Baca said, hopefully help you accomplish your own miracle. So I would like to introduce the panel members to my right, and just briefly for the format, each one will speak for about 10 minutes, and then at the end I will ask a question of each panel member, and I encourage all of you to prepare your questions and participate in the discussion afterwards in the time that we have remaining. So to my immediate right is Reverend Gerald Stinson. He is a magna cum laude graduate of both Occidental College and the Divinity School of Harvard. He's a senior minister of the First Congregational Church of Long Beach and has been a theological educator in Southern Africa. He's currently an associate fellow of West Star Institute, also known as the Jesus Seminar, and is a member of the National Advisory Board of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. He's a lifelong pacifist and a strong advocate of religious pluralism. In 1992, Reverend Stinson received the Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Award by the city of Oceanside and the Oceanside NAACP excuse me, recognition in civil rights. And in 1997, he was the first Church of Christ minister and was given an award by that group by the Pacific Southwest region of the Christian Church. Next to Reverend Stinson is Ramona Ripston, Executive Director of the ACLU Southern California. She's the first woman to have directed the activities of a major affiliate. Yay. She has outstanding accomplishments in litigation, lobbying, and education. She has also been appointed to the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority Commission by our Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. In August 2006, the Los Angeles Times named her one of the most 100 powerful people in Southern California. She's been a visiting lecturer at UCLA and guest on Daily Review, KPFK Radio, and KBC talk shows. Ms. Ripston has also been recognized as a Woman of Achievement by Women for and received many other honors. She's an outstanding litigator, and I'm sure you'll be very interested in what she has to say. Next is Rabbi Stephen Jules Stein. He's a rabbi has been a rabbi since 2003, currently serving at Wilshire Boulevard Temple. Rabbi Stein coordinates the temple's Tikkun Olam, which roughly translated is repairing the world, and directs the Center for Religious Inquiry. He was educated at Northwestern University and the University of Southern California in the Vienna Conservatory. He has worked in Europe, Israel, conducting several renowned symphony orchestras, operas, and ballet. Very diversified. He is now serving as co-chair of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, known as Keshet, Reform Rabbinical Network of the LGBT Rabbis, and is former vice president of the Wilshire Center of Interfaith Council. And finally, we have Chaplain Javier Stauring, who since 1996 has overseen the largest Catholic detention ministry program in the nation. In 2002, Javier became co-director of the Office of Restorative Justice. He's also policy director for faith communities of families of children. And his focus is going to be on the impact of incarceration of families and the community. So I'm going to now ask our first speaker to begin with a presentation. Yes.
I'm a preacher, so I want a pulpit, I guess, rather than just sit down there. Actually, I can't see that side from behind there. What can I, liberal Protestant minister, say that would be helpful to those of you seeking social work degrees? When you complete your studies, you'll be moving into a fragile, wounded world to try to help people in need. You're the idealists, the ones with hope. Whether you end up in government service, a private agency of some sort, a school, jail, or hospital, you're going to see people at their worst and at their best. People whose lives are either in downward spirals or people buoyant with new hope. Some of your days may be unbearably frustrating, others filled with satisfaction. And maybe the one thing I can urge you to do is pay attention to where you stand and how you see and hear. Robert McAfee Brown, when he was the chaplain at Stanford University, said what you see in life depends on where you stand. And what you hear depends on who it is you listen to. Let me tell you a story that author Robert Fulghum once told. He said, "This is my neighbor, nice person. Came out her front door on her way to work. She was in her looking good mode. She's locking the door, picking up her daily luggage, the purse, lunch bag, gym bag, and trash can to empty on the way out. She turns, sees me, and waves, takes 3 steps across the front porch, and screams at the level of a fire engine at full cry. Spider web. She has walked full force into a spider's web. And the pressing question, of course, is just where is the spider now? She flings her baggage in all directions while doing a jitterbug sort of dance. Clutching at her face and hair, she again screams as she tries to open the front door without unlocking it. She tries again, breaking off the key, this time inside the lock. Runs to the back door, continuing to shriek. That's one view of that scene. But consider a different picture of that same collision at the web. A rather ordinary, medium gray, middle-aged spider has been up since before dawn working on her web. All is well. It's a nice day. There's no wind. The dew is just right to keep things sticky. She's checking the moorings and thinking about the little gnats that will soon be her breakfast. And then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. It's like an earthquake, tornado, and volcano all put together. The web is torn loose and wrapped around what appears to be a moving haystack. And a huge piece of raw but painted meat is making a screaming sound that the spider has never heard before. This thing, whatever it is too big to wrap up and eat later. And it's moving too much to hold down. Should she jump for it or hang on and hope? A human being, that's it. She's caught a human being, and the pressing question from her perspective is, what is this human going to do, and where will it do it when it gets wherever it's going? Now, we know that the neighbor will probably take a shower and shampoo her hair to make sure the disgusting creature is gone, and then put on clean, web-free clothes. The spider, if she survives, will have quite a story about the big one that got away. Now, that collision looks very different depending on the perspective from which it is seen, that of the neighbor or that of the spider. We live today in a divided nation. There are two very real Americas. One is the America of the affluent, the educated, and the powerful. And the other is the America of the poor, the struggling, and the outcasts. We've had these two Americas for a long time. Back in 1963, Michael Harrington wrote the book, The Other America, which literally sparked the war on poverty. But since then, instead of things getting better, the divide between the two Americas has become deeper. I think it's critically important for us to look at life through the eyes of those who dwell in that other America, the America of the poor and the outcasts. We need not only eyes to see what it is that they see, but ears to hear what they hear. And we need to place our bodies by their sides, standing in support and solidarity. And sometimes we must even become their voices, the voices of the voiceless. During the Vietnam War, the Chicago Hilton Hotel invited some injured soldiers that were in the rehabilitation programs at the Veterans Hospital to come to the hotel's floor show that they had on weekends. They did that just a couple of times until they had to withdraw that invitation. It seems that several affluent patrons didn't like looking at people who had been disfigured in military combat. If they didn't see it, perhaps they could pretend it didn't exist. Sociologist Philip Slater's 1970 book, The Pursuit of Loneliness, called this behavior the toilet assumption. The notion that unwanted matter, unwanted difficulties, unwanted complexities, unwanted people will disappear if they're flushed away from our immediate field of vision. Right now, there are folks who sleep outside my church each evening on our church property, 20, sometimes 30 of them, and there are those who would flush those homeless folks away. You see, they're not the worthy homeless, those who've had some bad breaks but seem able to put their lives back together. No, these are the chronically homeless. These are folks who are mentally ill or gradually being destroyed by substance abuse. But all of them are nevertheless the children of God. They're all people trying to make it through life. They just come to the church to sleep. They've not been accused of committing any crimes, though the police hassle them time after time. And the folks walking down the streets or living in the neighboring buildings simply don't want to see them. They're not doing anything to anyone. They're just sleeping there. But, if they weren't there, maybe those in the affluent America could pretend that all was well and avoid thinking of the more than 6,000 homeless people in Long Beach. So the folks walking by walk faster, they keep their eyes straight ahead, and they call City Hall for help. And then the city prosecutor sends the church a threatening order to abate our nuisance. They're not called the homeless. They're not called people. They are our nuisance, and we're to abate them. And if we don't abate that nuisance, we've been told we can be fined $1,000 a day. I've told the prosecutor we're simply not going to obey him, and we're currently in a standoff. Now, if those walking by, if the prosecutor himself were to stop, smile, say hello to those who sleep at the church, they would find that these are kind, caring human beings who've actually formed a community and take care of them, each other. We need to stand at their side. We need to look at life through their eyes. There are lots of outcasts in that other America of ours. We need to stand at the side of gay and lesbian and bisexual and transgender teenagers. We need to see life through the eyes of those young people, 70% of whom report some experience of harassment or violence. Do you know that almost a third of our nation's youth suicides are LGBT people, young people? In Long Beach, 70 to 80% of the runaways of the homeless youth are lesbian and gay. We need to look at life through their eyes. One of the tragic ironies today is that sometimes those who've been oppressed themselves help oppress others. I arrived once at the Long Beach City Council meeting to speak in support of a marriage equality resolution. And I found, 2 minutes, okay, thank you. It was very subtle. I found there was not a seat open in the council chambers, that all the seats had been taken primarily by African American people sent to the council chambers by their pastors to oppose the civil liberties of gay and lesbian folks. Folks who had themselves been excluded, now working to exclude others. Likewise, I've had gay church members who want to discriminate against immigrant workers. Women who have themselves experienced glass ceilings writing off all parolees as worthless. We've got to stand by the side of all those that our society, with its other America, casts out. We've got to stand by frightened immigrants who are here only to send money home to their impoverished families. We've got to stand by confused Muslims whose faith is deep and rich and peaceful, and yet who experience hatred from uninformed and often bigoted people. We've got to stand by those and see through the eyes of the weary and frustrated parolees who've done their time, but still no one wants to give them a chance to start anew. It really does matter where you stand, through whose eyes you look, through whose ears you hear. There is goodness, there is hope, there is promise in each and every one of our global brothers and sisters. May all of you, as you move into the world of social work, help the rest of us remember that. Thank you.
Thank you for those inspirational words and reminding us of the two Americas. Next, I'm going to call on Ms. Stinson to, Ripston, to tell you about her victories in court on behalf of the homeless and equal education opportunities.
Good morning, and thank you for joining me today, or for my being able to join you today. It is significant that I am here primarily with religious leaders dedicated to confronting inequality. Religious commitment to social justice is rooted in texts from around the world, like the Hebrew Bible, the Christian New Testament, the Buddhist sutras, the Muslim Quran, and the Hindu Vedas. But in America, we also have other sources of inspiration and obligation, the Constitution and its Bill of Rights. Our laws and our treaties give us our commandments, the secular, the thou shalt, thou shalt nots. We look to these texts and their philosophical and political foundations for the blueprint to create a just community. Martin Luther King Jr. was so effective because he had a vision in both the spiritual and the secular. He spoke of the divine commandments to love and to seek justice, but also of the Bill of Rights guarantees of freedom of speech and press. I was there at the March on Washington when Dr. King gave his inspiring I Have a Dream speech, where he invoked the visions of the biblical prophets, and stressed that his dream was rooted in the American dream, invoking the Declaration of Independence and the need for America to honor the Constitution's promise of equality for all. However, true equality and justice still elude our grasp, remaining a distant vision on an ever-receding horizon. Thus, more than 2 centuries after the Constitution was ratified, 139 years after the 14th Amendment to the Constitution promised equal protection to all, 2 generations after the landmark victories of the Civil Rights Movement, racial inequality still exists, and other kinds as well, in education, income, medical treatment, death rates, and treatment in the criminal justice system. California's Black Legislative Caucus just released a major report called The State of Black America, laying bare many alarming racial inequalities. I urge you to please read that report and don't let it deter you that it was co-authored by a UCLA professor. The report notes a median income of $35,000 per year for Americans, compared to $54,000 for whites. In fact, Los Angeles has the state's lowest median income for blacks. The study reports that 22% of blacks in California live in poverty, almost 3 times the percentage of whites living in poverty. And while 65% of whites own their own homes, the black home ownership rate is stuck at 39%. The report chronicles similar gaps in areas ranging from health to housing to preschool enrollment. And as you may imagine, there are also significant disparities when we look at the experience of Native Americans and Latinos and immigrants as well. Confronting inequality has been at the heart of the work of the ACLU of Southern California. And today, I'd like to speak about just 2 areas of our work, education and homelessness. Not that we're not working on all the others, and if I had an opportunity, I might have asked the sheriff some questions about the jails. But I've been limited to 10 minutes, and so I have to speak rapidly and can talk about only 2 areas. In a landmark suit, we took on the shocking inequities of California's public schools, where black, brown, and poor children suffered in schools with filthy conditions and crumbling facilities. Schools without heat, books, desks, schools filled with rodents but lacking qualified teachers. These conditions would simply never be tolerated in upper-class schools or white schools, yet we accept third-rate schools for third-rate children. We effectively trap countless children in deprivation and despair, putting them on a de facto poverty track or penitentiary track or just a plain oblivion track. We deny kids the training and development they need to get good jobs, engage in their communities, and take care of their families. All the while fooling ourselves into thinking that we won't all pay the price for that eventually. We can't approach excellence in teaching and achievement or hope to provide first-class education when government lawyers go into court and argue with a straight face that kids don't need textbooks in order to do homework. And that is what happened in our litigation. You would think that all rational people would agree on the need for clean schools with sanitary facilities, up-to-date textbooks, and quality teachers. Yet the state of California fought us tooth and nail on this case. They spent $25 million defending against this litigation. $25 million that could easily have gone to these poor schools in California. Finally, after 4 years in the courts, we got a settlement that mandated close to $1 billion in school improvements for our state's most desperate schools. But I've learned through years of experience that winning a lawsuit or getting a court order is not enough. The hard work of winning the agreement must be followed by the hard work of enforcing it. So we have community organizers working with parents and students and teachers, empowering them to assess school conditions and report problems. We have an attorney traveling across the state conducting enforcement inspections, and yet still we face resistance. Just last week, we filed a complaint against the Compton School District, which 2 years ago had received over $300,000 to do needs assessments, but had failed to conduct any of the 33 required assessments, and thus did no improvement. While the students at Compton suffered in classrooms with broken windows and no heat. We must intervene with kids when they are young to equip them to have decent lives. If we fail to do this, we know where the slippery slope of despair and hopelessness will lead them. Inadequate education, lack of low-income housing, mental illness, drug and alcohol addiction, lack of good job skills and life skills contributes to the almost 90,000 people of all races, but disproportionately black, who are homeless on Los Angeles and the county streets. This in a state that boasts, as Jay Baca said, the fifth largest economy in the world, in a city that boasts millionaire mansions and high-priced artist lofts. It allows an affordable housing crunch, a city that pursues fancy entertainments and shopping developments like the Staples Center, LA Live, and the Grand Avenue Project without ever accounting for how many low-income housing units are demolished to make room for them. Or without paying attention to how many tax breaks these endeavors are getting. Projects receive millions of dollars so that we, the affluent, can enjoy new playgrounds. We've seen this happen before when the low-income Latino residents of Cheyenne Ravine were displaced for Dodger Stadium and replaced. Housing was promised. Well, the stadium, Dodger Stadium, was built. The housing never was. Too often our leaders have 2 minutes? There's so much to say. Too often our leaders, if I speak rapidly, forgive me, too often our leaders have responded to homelessness and harassment and arrest, but you can't sweep human beings off the streets as if they were garbage. Does anyone really think we can arrest our way out of the homeless problem? I would have liked to ask Lee Marker that. Does anyone really think that a jail cell is a replacement for a shelter or for decent housing? The mayor, the city council, and the board of supervisors talk about the need for housing and services, but we are still waiting for the regional homeless service centers promised by the supervisors and the supportive housing promised by a mayor I like, but he hasn't delivered. Given the shameful lack of services and housing, we went to court to stop the police from arresting homeless people for sitting on the streets when there were no shelters for them to go to, or no affordable housing. The court agreed that it is inhumane to criminalize being poor, to make it illegal for people to be on the street when there is literally no other place for them to go. We were criticized by the media. The LA Times ran an editorial, politicians, businesses, for stopping the arrests and the harassment. But where is their commitment to building the transitional housing and social services needed to help people repair their lives? Where is their commitment to preventing the conditions that lead people to despair and desolation on our streets? Don't we all have a responsibility to the least among us? Don't we all need to stop turning away because we do not feel the misery suffered by those who don't seem like us, or look like us, or talk like we talk? You are among the future social workers, the community leaders, and the service providers, and the taxpayers, and the voters, and the campaign contributors, and the writers of letters to the editors. You have the ability to put justice and fairness and equality at the top of the agenda. It is your responsibility because it is the responsibility of everyone. One of the other brilliant things Dr. King said, he was to stress that a threat to justice anywhere was a threat to justice everywhere, because we are all bound together in a web of mutuality. We must honor the ties that bind us together, whether we think those ties are a function of the will of God or a result of a social contract. You have the ability, and I'm sad to say the obligation, to bring your talent and your commitment to bear to address these problems, to seek out their causes and contribute to their solutions. I can tell you it's not easy work, but it is good work. It is noble work. It is righteous work. It is work that you can commit to and be proud of. I thank you for inviting me here today, and I look forward to continuing this work with you.
I can see that she got you all ready to go, so I hope you keep that momentum and don't forget those wonderful words. Okay, next we have Rabbi Stein, who will address you on how rabbinic tradition forms our thoughts and behavior.
Shalom Aleichem, may there be peace upon all of you, and I stand before you particularly excited not only for the topic and to be with these guests, but I have to admit I'm a very proud Trojan. And that being said, I'm now going to spend 10 minutes talking about sex. So, but actually, I'm not, and that's probably the point of all this. It was over 60 years ago that the great American playwright Lillian Hellman wrote, "For every man who lives without freedom, the rest of us must face the guilt." We've heard a lot today of the great promise of America, the land of the free, of the home of the brave, and how that promise has in many ways yet to be fulfilled. Unfortunately, it is the role of religion that has brought into the world, and certainly into this country, that last acceptable form of prejudice, the prejudice against men and women who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered. It is a particularly difficult prejudice to confront, because in all but the most unusual ways, it is, of course, completely hidden. It is not your gender. It is not your affluence. It is not your skin color. It's hidden. But that prejudice is pervasive. In this country, 2/3 of the states have laws on their books that will allow you to fire someone simply because she or he is lesbian or gay. And that person has no recourse. In this country, if you happen to be lesbian and gay and a parent, I'm going to warn you, don't enter the state of Oklahoma. Why? Now you won't laugh. If you enter the state of Oklahoma as a gay parent with your child, and God forbid your child gets sick and has to go to the hospital, that hospital may well yank that child out from under you, call that child a warden of the state, and you have no rights. Why? Because you're homosexual. That is in America. All across this land, every lesbian and gay American is denied over 1,000 federal rights, for which there is no recourse. Religion started all of this, and I want to spend my time at least showing you one way by which religion has found a way through it, a way through to a new light. And I speak particularly from Judaism and most particularly from a Reform Jewish basis. In the very beginning, the first chapter of the Bible, the creation of the world, we have a very unusual sentence, and God created man, b'tselem Elohim, in God's image or God's shadow. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Now, in rabbinic tradition, every word of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, or the whole of the Hebrew Bible, are sacred. They must have meaning. No word is wrong. So how do we struggle with God created him, male and female, he created them? Doesn't work. Well, it does for the rabbis over 1,500 years ago, because they imagined that maybe the very first human being wasn't a male or a female, but a hermaphrodite. Now just imagine, 1,500 years ago, rabbis sitting around going, oh yeah, the first person in the world was a hermaphrodite, a human being with the genitalia of both sexes. And maybe that's what God really wanted. We have a very ancient, very powerful teaching that can see us to a newer, broader light. But that notwithstanding, the overwhelming commandment in the Bible is not to worship one God. It is not to work 6 days and take the 7th as a Sabbath, a day of holy rest. The overwhelming commandment in the Bible, 34 times. You care for the ger, the yatom, and the almanah. You care for the stranger. You care for the widow. You care for the orphan in your midst. And why do we do this? Because all 3 of these classes of people, certainly in the time the Bible was written, were completely vulnerable. They were unsupported. They had nowhere to turn. And it was the ancient Israelite prescription to always look out for those for whom there is no support. That in and of itself created an extraordinary teaching. Extraordinary not so much for what it says, but for who Jews have been in the world. At the height of this, let's say, 3,000-year experience, we have probably been no more than 1/3 of 1% of the population in this world. At this moment, we're 1/5 of 1%. If the whole world is $1, we've got about 33 cents Christians, we got about 21 cents Muslims, and 1/5 of 1 penny are all the Jews on the planet. But yet, almost 2,000 years ago, this ancient teaching, as regards a city in which Jews and non-Jews reside, the Jewish charity collectors will raise funds on behalf of the Jews and the non-Jews, and provide sustenance for the Jewish poor and the non-Jewish poor. Furthermore, Jews will visit the Jewish ill and the non-Jewish ill, bury the Jewish dead and as well the non-Jewish dead. Additionally, they will comfort Jewish mourners and non-Jewish mourners while retrieving the lost tools of Jews and non-Jews alike. Why?
mipnei darchei shalom, because it leads to paths of peace. 2,000 years ago, Jewish sages understood that even this teeny tiny populace could not in and of itself care for itself and forget about the rest of the world. That wasn't its duty. That wasn't the world's obligation. We have to be a part of making this world full of peace, full of wholeness. And now, more even to our time and to the point, 200 years ago, as Reform Judaism as an idea was really fully birthed, first in Germany and then in America, one of our founding philosophical fathers, Rabbi Dr. Abraham Geiger, spoke about the role of secular wisdom in the realm of faith. And he said, faith and reason are two beacons, each shedding its own light, but both ultimately fusing into one bright beam. Faith, reason, one bright beam. This is Judaism's doctrine. This is its wisdom. This is the key to its survival. That powerful statement allowed us to understand that all of what we know in secular realms of science must be applied to our faith. We cannot have faith without facts, and facts without faith take us nowhere other than 2 + 2 = 4. We know now that the homosexual man or woman has a different sexual orientation and not a necessarily different moral orientation or spiritual orientation. It was Martin Luther King, and we're all quoting Dr. King for very many and very good reasons. He wrote that history will have to record that the greatest tragedy of this period of social transition, then in the 60s, was not the strident clamor of the bad people, but of the appalling silence of the good people. It was 25 years ago that a group was formed first in New York to combat this enormous silence in the realm of AIDS. It was called ACT UP. And they had a simple, powerful slogan: silence equals death. And now, 25 years later, each and every one of you, each and every one of us, have a choice. We can choose to speak up. We can choose to use our intellectual power. We can choose to make a difference. And I dare say we must all speak out, mipnei darchei shalom, because it leads to paths of peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and right on time. It's really difficult to be the bad guy up here, I have to tell you. Finally, we're going to hear from Chaplain Javier Stauring, and he's going to address the impact of incarceration on members of the family and the community.
Thank you. I'm sure you've all heard when the last speaker comes up and he says, oh, how difficult it is, following such good speakers, but I was really set up on this one. We got a couple of preachers. We have Ramona, and like my man said, the sheriff with his sermon. I'll do my best. Gerald started out by talking about how our views depend on where we stand. I've been walking in and out of jails for the last close to 20 years. So I'll admit that my views are a bit biased. But just so that I can get a feel for maybe how far I might be from everybody else, a show of hands. Who believes that a young person who spent time in jail is going to come out better educated, better prepared to get a job and be hired and maintain that job, better morals and values, an overall better human being? Who thinks, okay, so I'm not that off. One story that has really stayed with me throughout the years was I accompanied this young man who was at juvenile hall through court, and he lost his case, and the day of the sentencing, the judge read his sentence as 25 to life plus 1 day. And I went back to juvenile hall to wait for him when he got back from court, and we sat there and we cried. And he said, Javier, you know what I'm going to miss the most now that I'm going to prison for the rest of my life? And I thought he was going to say, my mom, my girlfriend, home cooking, I don't know. He said, I've been here at juvenile hall for over 2 years, and I can't even hum a song when I'm taking a shower. And it's that type of dehumanization and despiritualization that happens in our detention centers. When everything has been taken away from you, those little things mean everything. So we're here talking about equality. And there's such a, I don't know, there's something off for me to be striving for equality in our justice system when I see that there are so many structural things wrong with our justice system that really don't allow for real justice to happen. The U.S. Supreme Court building has carved on the front of the building, equal justice for all. That is really that's the foundation of our legal system. However, our juvenile justice system is anything but equal. Our juvenile justice system is very unequal and is very separate. Report after report after report documents that there's an overrepresentation of youth of color at every step of the justice system. From, who law enforcement is going to pull over and search, to when they bring the youth to juvenile hall and the intake officer decides whether or not they're going to spend time at juvenile hall or call up the parents to release them to parents, to when the court decides whether or not the kid is going to be tried as a juvenile or as an adult, to the sentencing. At every step, there's proof that there's an overrepresentation of youth of color. And they refer to it as DMC, disproportionate minority confinement. And it has huge repercussions on our entire society. For a nation that relies so much on incarceration, nobody else in the world, no other country in the world does what we do. 1 out of every 4 prisoners in the world is right here in the United States. Over 2 million people in the world. At a cost of $40 billion. We talk about California being the leader economically compared to the rest of the country and compared to the rest of the world. Well, guess what? We're also the leader in incarceration. This year we will spend $9.2 billion on the prison system. That's more than what we're going to spend on higher education. There are 2 countries in the world that have not ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Care to guess? Does anybody know which 2 countries? United States and Somalia. I was in Germany a couple of years ago, and I was asked to come speak about our juvenile justice system to practitioners from Germany, from their juvenile justice system. And it was being simultaneously translated, so they had their earphones on while I was speaking. And when I said in the state of California, we give 14-year-olds sentences of life in prison, it's like everybody stopped and turned back and looked at the interpreter and said, can you repeat that? Because they thought that the interpreter had made a mistake. So they asked me to repeat it. I said, in California, we give 14-year-olds life sentences. And they said, well, how can that be? Why don't you tell society what these prisons are doing? Because they thought that in some way this was happening behind the walls, it was a secret. I said, no, unfortunately, we vote for those laws. And then they said, well, why don't you organize the churches? Why don't you organize, religious folks? Because I'm sure that they were thinking no moral society would allow this to happen to their children. And at the end of the conference, this one lady stood up and she said, we live in a country that has committed the worst atrocities against humankind in our generation, referring to the Holocaust. And she said, in some ways we learned from the United States that there is a chance for redemption. And how sad that you're not willing to give your own children a second chance. A lot of what I've said so far, I'm sure many of you have heard. The statistics, the fact that there's an overrepresentation of youth of color that are affected by our justice system. These dialogues, these discussions about crime and punishment have been going on since the beginning of times. And the liberals will say it's too harsh of punishment, and there are socioeconomic reasons for crime. And conservatives might say it's not harsh enough punishment, and bottom line, it's your own responsibility. You have to take responsibility for your own actions. But usually, the discussions end right there with the individual offender. And in reality, the biggest cost brought on by our justice system is the collateral damage. The damage to our families and our communities. Our laws have a powerful impact on the basic foundation of what families and communities should stand on. I have 3 children. The most important message that I believe I can convey to my children is that my love for them is unconditional and I will be there for them no matter what. At juvenile hall, one of the most common stories that I hear from the kids is, my mom said, this is it. This is the last time she's going to visit me. If I get busted again, she's not going to go through this again. Because the toll that it takes on a family. Parents that have to stand outside 3-4 hours to get a brief visit with their kids. That have their phones cut off because it costs $3 a minute to accept a collect call. It's a huge burden, a huge weight on families. I talk to kids that their relationship with their girlfriends is nothing but stress and drama. Where teenagers should be learning about a relationship with your girlfriend or boyfriend to be something healthy and something that, you love and you trust and you can rely on. Their experience is one of not being able to trust, wondering what she or he is doing, Friday, Saturday night. Wondering, is this relationship even worth it? So these basic things that help form our relationships with family and with community are eroded by the experience of incarceration. How stressful is it for us when we decide that we're going to move, let's say, from one neighborhood to another or to another state? Think about the young people who are in a detention facility who maybe were able to connect with a few other kids and build this trust and build this sense of, being able to rely on one another, only for one night a staff to come and say, okay, roll it up, tomorrow morning you're going to another facility. And you have no say-so in the matter. You can't prepare for it. A lot of times you can't even say goodbye to people. Now, folks might say, well, they shouldn't have gone to jail in the first place. And I think that is part of what makes this such a complex problem. That so easily we'll say, well, that's them, this is us, and they need to deal with their actions and the consequences to those actions. But it affects every one of us. One message that I wanted to bring to everybody. I'm used to it. One message that I wanted to bring to everybody here is that it's not us and them. It's all of us. It does affect all of us. I sit on an advisory board for a national organization that's mission is to develop and sustain peace in the communities. Very progressive folks from around the country that spend their lives trying to do this. But when I talk about, but wait a minute, we need to talk about the people that are in jail too. They just don't connect that. And it's not just the immigration issue. You'll see it happen there too, where we talk about, well, they're not criminals, so they shouldn't be treated this way. I was at a retreat a couple of years ago where they brought the brightest folks working on racial discrimination, and we were talking about structural racism. And I said, prisons and jails, you would have a hard time trying to create a place, a system that would develop racism as good as they do it in prison and jails. Why can't we talk? And they're like, yeah. Okay, now let's get back to our issues. So accept the invitation by Sheriff Baca to do the internship with the sheriffs. Also accept the invitation to stand with those in jail. And I can tell you, I have a lot of volunteers that come into juvenile hall because they believe that they can come in and transform the life of a young man or woman. But over and over and over again, what we see is the lives that are transformed are those adults that come in and visit with the incarcerated youth. So I invite you into jail and spend some time. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And now that my time as the henchman and the shark lurking in the water is over, I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. Preliminarily, to start out, I'd like to ask Reverend Stinson. The first question is, we've heard it said that the Ten Commandments and biblical interpretations teach us morality and compassion. What do you think is the obligation of society, and where in society should those principles come from when religion plays no part in the educational system?
I don't want religion to play a part in the educational system. I think that one of the most important principles of this nation is the separation of church and state. And I think it is a challenge to figure out how, in an increasingly secular society, we're going to develop the values of compassion and peace. But I think we can do that. I mean, it's seeking after the common good. I'm never going to be free until all my brothers and sisters in this nation are free. I'm never going to be secure until we all have some share in our wealth. And I think it's that kind of common values and just simply the common sense that says it's not only unfair that the homeless are treated the way they are, but until we find a way to treat them as humans, none of us will be fully human in this society. And we've got to start helping our children come to those values.
Thank you. My next question is to Ramona Ripston. You mentioned that there is a gap between the judgment rendered by the court and actual implementation in the community. What can be done, and how can you encourage to make sure that that gap is filled?
Well, there are several things that happen or can happen when you file a lawsuit. First is that the parties agree and a sum of money exchanges or a new law is changed. But in many instances, particularly today, the people who sue, the ACLU, and the people we sue sign a consent decree. And what that means is that the government agrees that they will do certain things, whether it is, in the case I talked about, the public schools. They will agree on paper, and they sign a document that says every school in the California public school system will have desks. Every school will have up-to-date textbooks. Every school will have textbooks students can take home. Every school will have clean facilities. We will check to see that there is air conditioning in the summer and that there is heat in the winter. They sign this, and then it gets sent down to school districts around the country. And school districts often tend to ignore it. This is a piece of paper that the state government signed, and they feel they don't have to do it. So what we do, and we're trying more and more to do it, because back in the 70s, before I knew better, we reached a consent decree with the jails about overcrowding. And when we didn't pay attention to that consent decree, the jails have become very overcrowded, where you have 6 men, the LA County Men's Central Jail, 6 men living in a cell where there should have been 3 men. And so what we have done with our school case is I have 2 organizers and a lawyer traveling the state with the consent decree, saying to school districts, this is what you have to do. This is the law. And if you don't do it, we will hold you in contempt. Now, another interesting part of that is empowering parents, because, you know, legal people cannot do it alone. And so what we are also trying to do is to empower parents to know that this is what the consent decree says, this is what you are entitled to, and you can go to your school district and you can demand these things. And if you don't get these things, you call us and we will see that you do. And that's what happened in Compton. Compton had broken windows, they had no heat. If you remember, several weeks ago we went through a very, very cold spell. The organizers said to the parents, you are entitled to heat. You are entitled to having these broken windows fixed. And they got the parents to call us. The lawyer, who had been one of the lawyers involved in the lawsuit, called the Compton School District. And it was amazing how quickly those kids got heat. So what it is watching and seeing that document the government signs saying that you are entitled to certain things really becomes a reality, because government does not want to do what it is told to do unless someone forces them to do it.
Thank you. Next to Rabbi Stein. What kind of movement do you see? Is this not on? I'll just speak up. What kind of movement do you see in the
Orthodox, conservative branches of Judaism and other Christian groups toward ordination of gay clergy?
Well, there certainly has been movement, most recently within the conservative stream of Judaism, where now literally just in the last couple of months, a ruling, if you will, has come down that openly gay women and men may be ordained as cantors and rabbis. And in fact, within the conservative movement, there is some autonomy amongst the rabbis, personal choice, if you will, that if it is within your spiritual parameters, you may officiate at a religious wedding of two gay Jews. In the Christian community, for which clearly I'm not an expert but know something, certainly probably the most powerful move was the ordination of Episcopal Bishop Gene Robinson. And while that was in many places greeted with great welcome and relief, it was, of course, also unfortunately responded to, and still is to this day, with some very, very severe approbation. So, you know, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You can look at women's civil rights, the civil rights of people of color, and see this same sort of path going on. And what you'll always find, that it's the majority that lifts up the minority. As much as any minority group may clamor for their appropriate rights, it's going to be the majority, those who have the power, that ultimately have to be the ones that are going to say, yes, we give it. If it weren't ultimately for men, women still wouldn't have the right to vote, right? And so people who happen to be lesbian and gay, no matter how much they may advance their argument, it's the people who happen not to be lesbian and gay that have to understand that, like it says on the Supreme Court, equal justice for all means everyone, and not minus 20 or 30 million Americans.
Thank you. And to Chaplain Javier Stauring, to what degree or how specifically can the family and our educational system take responsibility for offender youths rather than incarcerating them?
In our educational system?
And the family, either one or both.
I guess the question has to do more with preventing kids from coming to jail. I'm not a
let's say they.
The educational system, but,
Okay. How can families be supportive and maybe help to put the convicted youth on the right track in lieu of incarcerating them?
Okay. Well, I think that I don't think this is this on? Okay.
Yeah.
It is. I believe that it's not only the educational system that right now does play a role in more youth coming to jail. It's the other systems that are also supposed to serve as safety nets to keep kids from coming to jail. We have zero tolerance in schools, so I'll run across kids at juvenile hall that talk about, I'm here because I was, in the schoolyard and I told another kid that I was going to kill him. Obviously, you don't want kids saying that, but do you want them to go to jail for that? So I'm here on a terrorist threat charge. We have a foster care system that there's a huge connection between kids starting out in the foster care system and then going to juvenile hall, another system that's supposed to serve as a safety net. I'll talk to kids that by the age of 14, they've ran away from 10 different foster care homes. The LA County jail system is the largest caregiver to mental health patients. More than any hospital in the United States, there's more mental health patients in the LA County. So when all of these different entities that are supposed to be helping people from coming to jail are actually funneling kids into jail, I think that parents should be standing up and speaking for systemic change in all of these different systems.
Thank you. We have about 15 minutes left for questions from the audience.
Could I talk a little bit about this question?
Yes, of course.
Well, I just wanted to say that California has the worst sentencing scheme in the country when it comes to sending people to prison. I also want to say that not too long ago we passed Proposition 21, which means that kids who are 17 years old get tried as adults. They get charged as adults, they go to adult court, and they serve in adult prisons.
That's as young as 14, actually.
14?
Yeah.
So we have a lot to look at when it comes to prison and jails and youth camps in California.
Yes, right here in the white sweater.
I wanted to know, in regards to the juvenile justice system, what is your opinion on, I believe it was in 2005, the Child Abuse Safety Act was expanded in regards to including juvenile sex offenders on public registries, depending on, the offense committed and the age of their victim. And I just wanted to know, what was your opinion on a system that is basically mandating juveniles to give up DNA samples and to be on these public registries for life. I just wanted to know your opinion on that.
Yeah, I think that a problem with it is that it's so encompassing. So it really doesn't take into account the circumstances of what you might have, in many, many, many times, just pled guilty to. Because there's many cases where you end up pleading guilty because they're offering you a lower sentence and can't risk taking it to trial and getting, a huge sentence. And especially with sexual offenses, you have a lot of cases where the young, let's say a boy and a girl, and the young man was, let's say, 16, and the girl was his girlfriend, but she was 14 or 13, and they had consensual sex, but it's found out, and it's a felony. And I know kids that to leave the state system, it's required. They will not release you unless you sign on that you will be tracked for life. And it's one of those invisible punishments, that kids get. Not just the adults, but that follow you for the rest of your life. If you have a felony on your record, it's very, very difficult to seal records now because of Prop 21. That will follow you for the rest of your life. So the rest of your life, you will not be able to be a cop. You won't be able to be a hairdresser. You won't be real estate. I mean, there's so many opportunities that will no longer be available to you. You can't apply for housing. Many school loans you can't apply for. On and on and on and on and on. So there's all of these what I call invisible punishments that stay with you the rest of your life.
I have a question. This question is directed to Rabbi Stefan. Or I think it's Stefan. I'm sorry if I have it wrong. But I believe you said you were a conservative religious organization, and I was wondering what's your belief or view on immigration and immigration homelessness? Because in San Diego, there's hundreds and hundreds of immigrants who live in canyons, cardboard boxes, under trees. So I just wanted to know your view.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I happen to affiliate with the Reform Movement. Wilshire Boulevard Temple is a reform organization. And my personal view dovetails completely with that of our synagogue and certainly of Judaism, particularly liberal Judaism. Every Sunday morning, we have volunteers from the temple opening the gates and welcoming some 130, 140 low-income and homeless people to come and get a bag filled with food. We have two different kinds of bags. If you can cook and have a kitchen, you get one bag. If you're homeless or you only have, like a hot plate, we give you another bag where all the food is easily and quickly available. We've worked with Habitat for Humanity. Homelessness for us is a critical and crucial part of how we see our duty to engage in what we call this act of tikkun olam, of repairing and mending the world. And immigration is of course part of that. I'm a first-generation American. My father was pulled out of the Holocaust as a very little boy and barely survived. Who am I to say that, the gates must be closed or only closed to this one or that one? Again, it's this Jewish command to look at the other, look at the stranger, and see them as yourself and do accordingly.
Can I jump in on this one, too, from a Christian perspective? The rabbi had quoted earlier how many times? 34 times?
34.
That the commandments come to help the orphan, the widow, and the stranger, the alien in your midst. When I was for 19 years a minister in North San Diego County, and my congregation was heavily involved with a lot of undocumented workers, there was one camp nearby, a group of folks. It was about 50, 60 people lived in this camp. They actually had created some streets and named the streets, and the single workers were in one area and the families in another. Very gentle people who were here supporting their families back in Mexico. And somebody at a retirement trailer area, mobile home park, 2 or 3 miles away, complained that they didn't like the vehicles going by back and forth to that camp. And as a result, the health department came in and bulldozed the camp. And those folks ended up living back in bushes, hiding out various places. The kind of cruelty that we... I think immigrants are now one of our newest groups that we can be cruel to and think we can get away with it. At least my own theology accepts the fact that the earth is God's and the fullness thereof. I don't know why I have an inherent right to the wealth of this nation and the folks who live a few miles south of the border don't. And
let me add a personal note that I, too, am a child of Holocaust survivors. My parents are 89. And I was born in Slovakia, so I am an immigrant, naturalized U.S. citizen.
Hello, I have a question over here. Thank you all for coming here today. I wanted to ask all of you, what advice can you give us new social workers about bridging the gap between the people of power and those of us who want to see a revolution happen?
Well, I'll speak first, and I will, as always, try to be the briefest. I think you just have to look at those tennis shoes that so many of us like to wear by Nike that say, just do it. You can be a part of this change, but apathy is a horrible, horrible disease in this country. And the more of us that speak out, the more of us that send the emails, stand outside with the picket signs, and like so many of you, dedicate your lives to helping and healing. You, in this country, you do have the power. You just got to exercise it. You got to never stop exercising.
I have a question. This is addressed to the chaplain. My name is Alicia Cass, and I'm a social work student and a former gang member for the majority of my life. And we all know that incarcerated youth and gang membership is a complicated issue that no one wants to deal with. So how can you give us advice as social workers to go into the jail systems, especially for the youth, to have an unbiased opinion with these children and help them change?
Yeah. I would say come and meet them. Bottom line, we have our ideas of who these kids are, many of us, from watching the 5 o'clock news. So we see them as demons. I mean, and the media has played a big role. I think politics has played a big role. But if you're watching, let's say, the 5 o'clock news and you just hear the next story is about young black male, what do you think the story is going to be about? What other stories do they have on the 5 o'clock news about young black males? And then if you hear from South LA, well, then you really know what it's going to be about. So come and meet them. It is the most powerful thing I think you can do. With open eyes, with open heart.
I have a question for Rabbi Stein and Reverend Stinson. I'm wondering if you can give some insight or certain advice for students who might be struggling with religious doctrine that does not embrace homosexuality, that demonizes homosexuality, and how we as social workers can struggle with those religious beliefs but also be able to support LGBT populations as our clients.
You can go first.
Well, I think it actually speaks very profoundly to the challenge, and I will speak for Jerry on this because I think in this we're in the same boat. It speaks to the challenge of your role. In rabbinic school, we are given lots of wonderful advice and guidance and education on providing spiritual counseling, pastoral care. And also we're taught very clearly there is a line beyond which then it goes into therapeutic counseling. And if you are not trained as a therapist, you really, really must not, for all kinds of reasons, not the least of which are legal reasons, go there, right? Because, I mean, this is actually, it's quite serious because, you come to the clergyman or clergywoman and you're very distressed and something's going on, and the clergy person says whatever they may think, and then, well, Minister so-and-so told me I should, and that's potentially very, very dangerous. We give pastoral care and spiritual counseling. Unless we're qualified therapists, we need to have the respect for the therapy profession, the counseling profession, to refer that out. Now, as regards religious doctrine, in the role of a therapist, I think it's important to certainly be supportive, but also to respect that other boundary and have a certain sort of neutrality. If someone is coming to you horrified because their parents said the Bible says blah, 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 and I happen to be struggling with my sexual orientation, you can certainly say to them there are many ways of experiencing Christianity and Judaism in particular that don't demonize that, and I suggest you might want to explore that with a religious professional. I think there has to be neutrality balanced with clearly support of that person, because they do need to know, A, there are many other extraordinarily valid ways of understanding faith in regards to one's sexual orientation, while at the same time not taking your role as a therapist or a counselor into the role of spiritual or pastoral care that is the province of a clergy person.
Let me answer it in a kind of a different way. I have had a number of counselors and therapists refer people to talk with me. These have to be people that are open to hearing other perspectives, but someone who says to a counselor, everything I've been taught says this is wrong, it's evil, and the counselor has been able to say, if you would like to hear a religious leader who has a different understanding of it, I've got someone I can suggest you go to. And in those cases, I have been able to talk to family members. And I also think, groups like PFLAG are wonderful referral sources, parents and friends and families of gays and lesbians. Part of it is folks that are hung up on religious dogma. Two things I would say. One is that I often argue. I think I can effectively argue why, from a Christian perspective, it's not sinful to be gay or lesbian. But also, I think that it's helping folks personalize the issue. When they begin to, if it's kept in an abstract way, them versus us, it's one thing. It's when you actually begin to see, these are people I know and love who are gay and lesbian, then the dogmas become a little more shaky, and it's easier to talk about some justice issues at that point.
It's exactly the same paradigm as going into the prison, looking at the homeless person and looking them in their eye, understanding the stranger, the widow, the orphan in your midst. You have to step into the other person's shoes and try not to judge.
We have time for one more question.
Hi.
Good afternoon. This question is for Rabbi Stein. I have a comment first and I have a question. Hebrews 11:1 says that faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. For example, I have faith that people's lives can change even though I can't see it, and so I think we all do as social workers. My question to you is, why do you feel that you have to have the facts in order to have faith that their lives can change?
That's a very good question. I can't, and I'm speaking for myself, I cannot understand this world without fact. I cannot comprehend that I see a chair if I don't know that is in fact a chair, or how to turn my car on without understanding that this is the tool by which the car gets turned on, or that this is a man and this is a woman. The whole world is a panoply of facts. I can't live without facts. I also cannot live without faith. And the challenge of melding fact and faith is sometimes great. It's challenging for me to see real signs of great hope in the world at this time, because there are several indicators that we've got a lot of problems confronting us. But I also can understand that you and I are absolutely no different in any way, except perhaps you're a woman, your skin is darker than mine, I don't know what your sexual orientation is, I don't know what your religious beliefs are. But I see you and I as equal. I see you and I as potentials to carry up that mountain, albeit perhaps different paths to the same place where there's peace and wholeness. And there is room in my heart and in my mind for acceptance and for difference.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming today and to the panel for your participation. And I hope you all found a way, a spark to make your miracle.
Go there.
Okay, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Just a few remarks that I would like to make as chair of the All-School Day. I'd like to thank everyone for making today a great day for us. It's always difficult when you chair an All-School Day committee because you're never quite sure if people are going to turn up. You're never quite sure what's going to happen. And so last night I keep having these nightmares that I would be here totally on my own without these wonderful people and without you participating in this great day today. There's special thanks to ourselves, but also to Dean Marilyn Flynn for making this day a success too. I don't know really if I want to go on to thank her too much because now I'm in charge of this event next year. But, you know, hopefully that I'll get the support and the help from yourselves to make it again a great day. Special thanks to our keynote speaker, Sheriff Lee Barker, and of course to our moderator, Aggie Hoffman. And for the wonderful job that she's done in making this a success for us. And also for the wonderful panelists that we've got. Outstanding. It's so good when we've got people like this in our community doing good work. And we as social workers recognize them for their good qualities. Without these good people, who knows what society would truly be like. So thank you. And also we've got a box lunch for everyone, you'll be pleased to know. But before you do that, there's evaluation forms for people to fill out, and please do that and give to Hillary at the back, who I thank. And also we have the UK program certificate that I myself is heavily involved in developing, and people who might be interested in it, please take one of our leaflets and see my assistant Susan Cornwall at the back, and she will give you a leaflet. And again, all I can say is thank you for making today very special. Thank you.